for the first time, blockchains are going to have access to fully verifiable, fully on-chain AI agents. What if there was a universal mechanism for staking and say, I can now run 100 networks on top of this?
Do you think ETH might end up being a better treasury asset because of the naturally built-in staking component, which generates yield? If Wall Street's in hunt for yield, this is the better avenue.
Absolutely. They want to minimize downside risk, but still have upside.
This episode is brought to you by Trezor. Trezor makes beautifully crafted hardware wallets that make it easy for you to safely store your cryptocurrencies. I'm a big believer in self-custody. I've been using hardware wallets for years, and Trezor was the pioneer of hardware wallets, and they started this journey in 2013. Their hardware wallets are open source, and they support a variety of tokens, from Bitcoin to the top altcoins, and even new coins such as BlackRock's BUIDL. And I'm personally a user of the Trezor Safe 5. It's a beautiful device and easy to use. And Trezor offers a hand-holding service where they can help you onboard and set up your device so you can speak directly to a Trezor representative who can hold your hand through the process. And if you use the code ThinkingCrypto, all one word, you can get 5% off your purchase of a Trezor device. So to learn more about Trezor and all their great devices and services, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Sreeram Kannan, who is the founder and CEO of EigenLabs. Sreeram, great to have you.
Really excited to be here and on the Thinking Crypto podcast with Tony. Excited to discuss all things Eigen and crypto.
Absolutely. And it's great timing because the SEC just recently announced updates to how they're treating liquid staking tokens, and EigenLayer obviously doing a lot when it comes to staking on Ethereum. And I'm really excited to dive into the details, but let's kick it off with your background. Tell us about where you're from and your professional background.
Absolutely. Before I started Eigen 4 years back, I used to be a professor at the University of Washington, Seattle, where I ran the UW Blockchain Research Lab. I got into crypto in 2017, 2018, transition. And before that, I used to work on genomics and AI. And so I switched pretty hard from doing that into, crypto. In fact, I had the opportunity to even write a research paper with somebody who won the Nobel Prize last year, David Baker. So came from a very different genomics related background, and then swerved heavy into crypto. I can tell you why. But also before genomics, and actually even before Bitcoin, I was working on peer-to-peer wireless systems.
Wow.
How do you build a wireless network where you don't have a base station, you don't have a Wi-Fi access point, nothing, just devices talk to each other and then create networks. So that was what I was working on. And then I moved from that to work on genomics. And then at some point discovered, oh my God, Bitcoin, Ethereum, these things are happening. And so I switched back into that. So that's a brief history of my background.
And what led to founding EigenLayer and building this technology, and specifically on Ethereum, of course?
Yeah. So what happened was in 2017, 2018, first, I got interested in this idea that the blockchains can solve coordination and trust problems because, people coordinate with each other when they can trust each other. But if there was a system that didn't need you to trust each other, that underwrites trust for all kinds of interactions, then we can actually create way more human coordination. So that became my driving thesis. And as I was looking at, initially what we did is we said, oh, but for this technology to scale to coordination problems, not just of money or finance, but much more broadly, right? Trust is a kind of fundamental ingredient of all of society. And so if you want to upgrade all of that, we need much more expressive, much more programmable systems. So you need to be able to write, for example, an AI inference protocol, which is on a decentralized network. You need to write a storage network, which can store petabytes of data on a decentralized network. You want to do all these things. Existing blockchains are not meant to have this level of programmability. Blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum expanded the amount of programmability of Bitcoin. Bitcoin came up with this absolute breakthrough concept of money that is verifiable. Only 21 million coins. You own your coin, right? But then Ethereum took it one step further and said, hey, now on top of Ethereum, you can write programs that live and run forever in the way that you set them up without having to trust anybody.
Right.
And so anybody could come in and permissionlessly come and innovate and create new programs. You don't have to trust who they are, what their parents are, like whether they're friends with JP Morgan or not. But on their own individual basis, you can say, oh, this is a good program that I actually want to invest to trade with, to be my counterparty, to hold my funds, whatever. And so that's a really big deal that I saw. But that still didn't have enough programmability to say, I want to start a new consensus protocol. I want to change, like, all the nodes run AI inference or like run some other gaming virtual machine to actually run the network. It doesn't have that kind of programmability. The programmability is still very limited. When we think of blockchains today, in 2017 when I came in, people said, "Oh, we can build the next Uber, next Twitter, next, Amazon on top of this."
Mm.
But it's simply even today we are nowhere near that. We've gotten like major milestones as a crypto community. Bitcoin's mainstream, DeFi is going mainstream now, just getting started. But the set of things you can actually build on this goes much farther. And so that's why EigenLayer, Eigen in German for your own layer, anybody should be able to come and build your own layer. Like whatever you have in your mind, you should be able to express it and build that on top of EigenLayer. So that was the kind of core idea.
Mm.
And so the thing we realized is as as pretty much all of crypto discovered proof of stake or staking, which is the idea that you put down your digital assets and then promise that I'm going to run like the ETH or the Sol network correctly, right? Like, say, you take these blockchains, promise that you're going to run them correctly, but they were still only for that one network, right? So you stake ETH and then you run Ethereum, stake Sol and you run Solana, whatever
Right.
other network, right? But what if there was a universal mechanism for staking? You stake ETH or whatever token and say, I can now run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 100 networks on top of this. Then anybody who wants to build a new network can think of EigenLayer as like, just like the cloud, I just take my program and upload it to the cloud and the cloud runs everything, right? So now instead of each person trying to build a whole new L1 or a decentralized community for every single project, they have already 15 to $18 billion of stake on EigenLayer. They already have the 2,000 operators that exist all around the world. And then you just press, like, take your program, send it to this network. All the nodes will now download and run, whether it's gaming, whether it's AI, whether it's metaverse, whatever the new one, or the new Uber, whatever you want. And that gives you a level of control and programmability that simply hasn't existed in crypto before. So that's the whole idea of EigenLayer.
Very interesting. So I want to make sure I wrap my head around this and also for the viewers and listeners. So you have Ethereum as a layer one. Is EigenLayer a layer two and it's pooling the staked ETH, bringing the security elements. And then if I'm Uber, like you said, building a layer three on top of EigenLayer?
Yeah, I think the layer one, layer two, layer three is like a somewhat confusing terminology, so I avoid it. But what is absolutely happening is EigenLayer is a program running on top of Ethereum, right? So that's correct. So you have Ethereum, and then on top of Ethereum, it's a smart contract, right? So that's the smart contract that holds this whatever $18 billion of fund. And so that program basically says, let's anybody else to come and create new networks, right? So you can come in and say, I want a storage network on EigenLayer. And then when you say that, that storage network itself doesn't require all the ETH nodes to run your storage network. It's basically people who have registered on EigenLayer, they go and run it. And all that happens on Ethereum is settlement, right? And what does settlement mean? Settlement is, hey, you said you're going to run this network and you ran it correctly, so I'm going to pay you out. Or you said you're going to run this network and you behaved maliciously, either attack the network, whatever thing. Therefore, I'm going to slash you, which means take away your funds. That's the only thing happening on Ethereum is settlement, either of payments or of like these slashing conditions. So what that means is now all these networks are not constrained by anything related to Ethereum. right? It doesn't matter what the Ethereum confirmation speed is, what the Ethereum data throughput is, computation, programmability, restriction, none of that matters. All that matters is you just have the same group of stakers and operators, and their settlement happens on Ethereum. But now the set of things you can build are actually much more complex than layer one protocols.
Mm.
Because most people, when they build another layer one, they just take the existing code base and say, here is just a clone of the same thing, right? In Cosmos, there are lots of L1s. They're all just the same thing, just running another instance of the same protocol. Whereas on EigenLayer, people build new and unique kinds of networks because that's what. So this is part of like our observation is people had to start a whole new layer one ecosystem for every new idea.
Mm.
And they just fragment it into like, oh, this is Filecoin storage, but that's all that it does. But is it money? Is it like has the best wallet? Does it have the best like DeFi? It's just like 500 things to create to solve a layer one ecosystem. So instead, we said, don't worry about all that. Build a new and productive service that grows the net market cap of crypto itself. And so that's what people do on top of EigenLayer. So, but the layer one, layer two is kind of right, but we don't use that terminology because it's confusing. But
Sure.
this is specifically what happens.
So with let's say we have Uber, we got Apple, we got Amazon, a bunch of companies looking to build on EigenLayer. Tell us about the freedom that they would have. Do they have full autonomy to build what they need to do, have the security, privacy, and these things?
Yes. So one of the things we obsess about is full programmability, which means you should be able to express anything that you could do if you built your own new layer one. You would have exactly the same amount of control on EigenLayer.
Mm.
Except you don't have to worry about issuing your own new token. You can if you want. In fact, EigenLayer allows not just taking ETH, but any token that you want. So you say, oh, I don't want ETH to secure it or Eigen to secure it. I want my own token to secure it. Absolutely, you can do that. But you don't have to, on day one, need that in order to just launch your network. You can use ETH, you can use Eigen. These are already there on the network. There is people staking and running operators for this. So when you come and deploy your service, you can say, yes, it's running, and then you build a certain amount of market momentum before you launch your token or whatever other things on top.
Mm.
So when somebody like Uber is coming in, or ideally a competitor to Uber, like Uber takes right now like 55% of the fees paid to like taxi drivers. Just like so unfair in the large scheme of things. We in crypto space, we talk about removing the intermediary, right?
Right.
And there's no intermediary like this, like taking food. I mean, the guy's like sweating, driving his like car, and then like somebody comes and takes 50%. I mean, it's just a completely different order of magnitude than even payments. People say Visa takes 1-2% or 3%, right? And this is somebody taking 55%. So when somebody else wants to come and compete and build a competitor to Uber, today what happens is you have to write like a competitor to Uber on a Ethereum or a Solana smart contract. And it's just not possible. It's
Mm.
completely impossible to do that because Uber has, you have maps, you have like data storage, you need like ride matching at like, speed of thought, right? You can't wait. You don't want to click and wait for like, 12 minutes for some finalization to happen. But that's the level of programmability that you get on EigenLayer is you can actually do like a pretty high level of programmability. In fact, what I didn't talk about earlier is we did this recent umbrella branding called EigenCloud. And so the idea of EigenCloud is to say, hey, there is EigenLayer at the base, which is providing shared security, right? It's a common security layer. And the
Right.
security layer is built on top of Ethereum and it inherits, some of the trust properties of Ethereum itself. But the layers are built on top. We built a layer called EigenDA, which is a data layer. So you can write data to it at the highest throughput in all of crypto. We just launched last week on mainnet an upgrade which takes it to 100 megabytes per second.
Mm.
It's faster than Solana. It's faster than anything else out there. So that's a throughput layer. So now when you're building your applications, you don't have to worry about where do I write or publish all my data for anybody to access it. It's already there. It's called EigenDA. It's the fastest throughput in all of crypto. You can just like write data to it.
Mm.
And then we're building another service on top called EigenCompute, where you basically say, oh, run any computation You don't need to worry about like how to build a decentralized network. Basically, abstracting more and more components inside the Eigen ecosystem, and then saying, it take a kind of software package, give it to Eigencompute, it'll run everything, it'll put the data on EigenDA, it'll do settlement on EigenLayer, everything. So you don't need to think through all these things, just making it easier and easier for developers to build these complex functions.
Very interesting. So Ethereum obviously has the first mover advantage as a smart contract platform, has the security, hasn't had any downtime. It's had incredible uptime compared to some competitors. So with EigenLayer, sitting on top of it, is there any concern that EigenLayer may have downtime, or is that all being secured by ETH? What do you think?
Amazing question. So EigenLayer actually is a smart contract on top of Ethereum. So there is like as long as Ethereum's running, EigenLayer itself will run.
Uh,
But your particular network may be secured by some set of operators, right? There could be like 5 operators, 10 operators, 100 operators. There are 2,000 operators on EigenLayer. So depending on how much you're willing to pay and how much, decentralization that you want, you can inherit that level of decentralization for your protocol. But if for your protocol built on top of EigenLayer, you only had one operator opt in, of course, if that operator goes down, then your service might go down.
mm,
But one of the things that we have, in addition to just decentralization, is strong economic incentives. When you write your protocol, you could say, oh, it's just one operator, but they have to put up $100 million of stake.
mm,
And if they go down, they're losing 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million. And so that's going to put a lot of pressure on them to make sure they're keeping their job straight, that it doesn't go down. But this level of control, we hand it to the protocols rather than we are ensuring that every operator is going to be alive all the time or whatever. It's up to you to decide as a protocol designer. It goes back to programmability and control, right? You can come in and say, I need 500 operators, but you have to pay 500 extra fees,
mm,
of course, right? But I need one operator, but I want them to put up $100 million of stake. That's up to you. We have the operator backing. We have the most, 2,000 operators. We have the stake, $18 billion of stake for people to opt in. As long as there is incentives in your protocol to do it, it could be using your own new tokens. The incentives could come from actual fees paid by people riding this new Uber. All of those things actually work.
that makes sense. You mentioned 18 billion in restake ETH, over
Yeah.
18 I read. Um, there's going to be some people watching and listening who don't know what the hell restake means. Maybe you could break that down. What is
Yes.
restaking, and then who are the folks who are restaking their ETH and that number hitting 18 billion?
Ethereum. So you asked me earlier why we built on Ethereum. We looked at both Bitcoin and Ethereum, of course, the two biggest sources of trust and networks in the world. So obviously, that's the two that we looked at. And we decided to build on Ethereum for two reasons. One, it's fully programmable. So any of the kind of slashing or payments and all these things can be done much easier on top of Ethereum than on Bitcoin. So the programmability is number one. Number two, Ethereum is a staking network itself, right? So people stake in Ethereum and then keep the network running. And so this concept of restaking, people get confused. So what it is something really simple. When you're staking on Ethereum protocol, what you're saying is, hey, I'm locking up my ETH and I'm going to run the Ethereum protocol correctly. When you come to EigenLayer, what you do is you say a little bit more. You say, oh, I'm locking up my ETH to run both the Ethereum protocol and the Uber protocol and the storage protocol. You choose which other protocols you're opting into. So you, as a staker, you're a stake. So who's the customer type? Is I'm already staking on Ethereum. So I say, oh, instead of just staking on Ethereum and promising to run the ETH node software correctly, I'm going to promise to run the ETH node software and a set of things I choose. Well, how am I opting into those things? I decide based on, am I getting paid enough for the risk I'm taking? Just like anywhere else, right? So you go and play in a DeFi protocol, you're basically saying, hey, is the risk and is the reward worth the risk that I'm taking? But here the risk is somewhat containerized because the risk is you just need to run the node correctly.
Mm,
Unlike in a DeFi or like a financial protocol, you are underwriting financial risks, which are very different, right? This is just operational risk. You just need to be not malicious, don't attack the protocol, keep your uptime promises. You're not going to lose your stake. So it's a much lower category of risk than pretty much anything existing outside. So, but because we have the single place in which hundreds of new networks are being built, you can earn rewards from all of them and stack your yield.
And are there institutions that are mainly restaking, or is it also retail? How does what's the
How does it
commitment?
split up, right? So when you're talking about like a $18 billion, you absolutely need institutional grade like opt-in, right? Otherwise, you don't get to these numbers. And so we have basically institutions, whether it is like a Coinbase, a Binance, OKX, all these different kinds of like exchanges, as well as custodians like Anchorage and BitGo and all these guys support restaking. And so what that does is when somebody comes and deposits ETH and wants to hold ETH there, they say, oh, I also want to restake on EigenLayer, right? So that's like a level of service that they offer. In addition to that, we have like, there is this concept of liquid staking protocols or liquid staking tokens,
Yeah.
where what they do is you go and deposit the ETH into that protocol, and the protocol says, we're going to take care of staking for you, and I'm going to issue you a receipt token that you've deposited one ETH into the protocol. And so I mint one. We have a protocol called Renzo. We have a protocol called Ether5, which are building liquid staking on top of EigenLayer. Because it's built on top of restaking, they call themselves liquid restaking, which is just a nuance, but it's basically the same as liquid staking. And so what this does is it basically stakes and promises that like, oh, we'll take care of all the abstract things for you. You just deposit ETH and then get this receipt token, easy ETH or ETH or whatever. So that's the ecosystem. So lots of retail people also participate in some of those protocols.
Since you mentioned liquid staking, the SEC recently came out, I think just this week, if I'm not mistaken, giving some clarity saying some of these protocols and activities are not securities. What are your thoughts on that? What does that mean for EigenLayer?
It's a huge, huge thing that the SEC would come out and say these kinds of things, because precisely this time last year, they'd actually go after anybody who's doing anything in this space.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surreal to see that the SEC come out and give clear guidance on what it means for a liquid staking protocol and why it is not considered like issuing a new stock. Because it's not, right? It's just a wrapper programmatically created, and the program's all like verifiable, immutable, on chain with like high degree of decentralized governance. What the SEC has come out and said is people, programs can create these liquid staking tokens, and so these liquid staking tokens do not come under the regulation of issuing new stock. Like, it's not like issuing an IPO for Google or anything. So they've come and clarified that. It, in the large scheme of things, it's an obviously correct thing that the SEC is saying it,
Right.
but it was not clear. And like it opened up when the regulatory thing is not clear, institutions, retail, maybe they don't care. They'll just operate, all these things. But institutions are very careful and thoughtful. And institutions will say, I don't want to touch any LSTs. They may be legally risky and all these things.
Mm.
With the opening up of this regulatory clarity, we expect the biggest grade of institutions, whether it's a BlackRock issuing an ETF, to participate in staking and restaking.
Mm.
Because now the opportunity is open. The other big institutional aperture is the digital asset treasury companies, right? So like starting with, Michael Saylor and the OG MicroStrategy, to now we have a whole category of Ethereum treasury companies, Joe Lubin, Tom Lee, you know, Kathy Woods investing in it. Like it's a big Peter Thiel investing in some of these things. So it's a big like trend of, hey, we need to actually open up access for crypto assets to the institutional market in a way that you also get the yield of these systems. Because that's a big value proposition that we have in the ETH and the DeFi ecosystem, where you can get yield in size. I think if you look at protocols that can actually deliver yield at like a $10-20 billion of scale, there's maybe three protocols. There's like Aave, Lido, EigenLayer. So, and we are very happy with the SEC guidance because we are the top US protocol,
Mm.
right, in terms of the total value locked, even including things like Solana, right? So we have higher value locked than pretty much anything else, So that basically means we have like an opportunity to engage with a broader institutional ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned the treasury companies. You're seeing more companies adding ETH. And do you think ETH might end up being a better treasury asset because of the naturally built-in staking component, which generates yield? But you can do additional things like restaking, like participating on a protocol like EigenLayer, and other DeFi activities. So it's almost again, if Wall Street's in hunt for yield, this is the better avenue.
Absolutely. And if you look at the profile of people who want to invest in like a PTC or a ETH, right? It's basically people, at least on the institutional sides, they want to minimize downside risk, but still have upside, right? Like that is the kind of like base portfolio. And so if you look at that and look at compare BTC versus ETH, BTC has the upside and of course, getting adoption, but ETH has both the upside and has the kind of like yield. So that gives you like a base layer of like, return while also potentially having like the possibility of the upside. That's one thing. The other thing which is going in favor of the ETH ecosystems is the stable coins being issued on top of Ethereum and all the other layer twos on top. And people think, okay, now that stable coins are issued, is the stablecoin company is going to get most of the value? And there is some truth to it because the stablecoin companies are keeping the treasury and other yield coming from these stablecoins. So they are actually having like a pretty smooth business model today. But as more and more, as the stablecoin regulations come up, there's going to be more issuers and people are going to compete to offer that yield back to the users. So that margin is going to get thinned. But also, because all of these build and settle on top of Ethereum, there is other really solid value propositions. For example, as stable coins go from like a single USD stable to maybe a euro stable to a yuan stable and a rupee stable and like this much broader category of assets. Because for many other countries, while today it is the USD going on chain is opening up access, right, which is a really cool thing. But for the country at the sovereign level, it's actually a risk. The risk is the rug risk from US back to them, right? So if you're a different country and then you think about, hey, what happens if US suddenly, gets into a trade war or something and then bans every USD held by our citizens? Suddenly all your citizens like USD goes to USDC or whatever thing goes to zero. This is a huge rug risk for those countries. So the counter response that I envision is the country is going to have like their own stables on chain, number one,
Sure.
and regulate the usage of these other stables to like some kind of constraints per person holding all these things. And once you have that, you're going to see that at the center of all these assets is a decentralized rug resistant asset, ETH.
Mm,
So when I want to switch from a USD to a rupee or a yuan, you go from USD ETH yuan, you go USD ETH rupee. So this is the programmable money thesis of ETH,
sure.
which is by enabling a big programmable economy, there is a central token and currency which is programmable, decentralized, undruggable, that actually gains value over time. I think that's the thesis that we are very bullish on.
Mm,
ETH as programmable money, and BTC as digital gold, right? It's simple, it's gold, it's like you hold it, it's solid, we're not going to change it, all that. Whereas there is a whole other element of like programmability of the system's stable coins, DeFi, other things built on top. And ETH as the natural source of like decentralized asset securing or like interacting with all of that.
You mentioned, with liquid staking and the clarity, a lot of folks are waiting for staking to be added to the Ethereum spot ETFs. Do you think that maybe the liquid staking clarity was the last hurdle in getting that approved, and that might increase inflows significantly to ETH spot ETFs?
And I would hope so, but I don't have inside information to share on like where the staking ETF approvals getting held up. But absolutely, I would expect the level of statements coming from the government, from the SEC commissioner, saying Project Crypto, we want US to dominate in the crypto markets, is the polar opposite of we want to extinguish, we want to choke the crypto markets. So I think it's just, so what happens is the regulatory apparatus takes time to catch up with the president's directives, right? So we're seeing, in August, the SEC commissioner issuing Project Crypto, whereas, the president issued it like in early January, right? So there's just that lag. And I think once that lag clears off, we're absolutely going to see this. And that's really what the arbitrage already the treasury companies are playing with, right? Because they're saying, hey, we can engage in, if you see every one of them, they're saying staking, restaking DeFi, every single one of them.
Yeah.
Because that's the things that you can do in ETH at low risk compared to anywhere else, right? So, of course, you can take a BTC and like do lend borrow on centralized exchanges, but the amount of like trustless financial like products that you can engage with ETH is much larger, specifically staking, restaking at the lowest level of risk, and then adding on top other DeFi financial positions. So I'm very confident that that's absolutely going to happen, starting with the treasury companies and then expanding out to ETFs. And basically, you will see ETFs issued at different levels of like risk. Some will just say it's just a bad ETF. Some will say it's a staked ETF. Somebody will say staked and restaked ETF, right? And so like you will have this like dial to tune up and down the risk reward curve.
Oh, for sure. I think you may have answered this, but I wanted to ask because I wasn't clear. So let's say going back to the example of Uber building on EigenLayer, who pays the gas fees? Like, or which token pays the gas fees? Or is it ETH? Is it EigenLayer token? If you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when somebody is building these new networks and services on EigenLayer, these are called AVSs. We call them AVSs for autonomous verifiable services, right? So think of these as, we don't think of chains as the base unit. I think like this has been all of crypto. Like, in fact, if you look at crypto today, you will see two big theses fighting with each other. One thesis is the big chain thesis. Oh, Ethereum is going to be the big chain, or Solana is going to be the big chain which congregates all the activities and apps. So that's one thesis that you see in crypto. Another thesis that you see in crypto is the app chain thesis. Or none of these big chains going to matter. Is basically application specific chains like BTC, like Hyperliquid, that are going to win because they actually build the application and they want to own the infrastructure end to end. And what EigenLayer is building is for the third thesis of crypto. It's totally different from the first two theses. It's neither the big chain nor the app chain. It is the cloud thesis of crypto.
Hmm.
And what is the cloud thesis? Is actually, if you go back to 1995, you will see this is the same question that people were debating about web applications. Is there going to be a hosting service where everybody hosts their website? Is there going to be every app runs its own servers? So it's exactly these two theses, and neither of them were actually correct. The correct thing was the cloud thesis. And the cloud thesis is there are layers, each layer basically doing something specialized. Like the cloud is, oh, here's a layer, we take care of all the hardware. You don't need to think about hardware. Just deploy your software here and then you can build it. But it didn't end there. On top of the cloud, there is the biggest economy of SaaS, software as a service, right? So each SaaS company, in fact, if you take the last 20 years, the most profitable investment sector, the VC investment sector, is software as a service. And
Hmm.
why is it? It's because each of them specialize in something unique. Is like MongoDB is a database company, Snowflake is a data lake, and each one, Stripe is a payments company, and PayPal is a peer-to-peer payments company. All these kinds of things, just building very special, specific things on top, which basically meant any application just mix and match these services so they don't have to build any of these services themselves. Okay, so that's the kind of like the what happened in the cloud. And Eigen is building for the cloud thesis of crypto, which is a third and unique thesis. I think only we are pushing forward with because we think this is what's going to happen. And so what happens is we have EigenLayer, which is basically the shared data center. We have the shared security layer, which is EigenLayer.
Hmm.
On top of EigenLayer, just like on a cloud, you have the storage services. We have EigenDA, which is a data service on top of EigenLayer. So you have high throughput data service on top of EigenLayer. And then people build other services on top. We have a thriving ecosystem of 100 plus services built on top.
Mm.
Okay, so now answering your question, because this context is important to understand, answering your question on what is the currency of payments, who does it go to? Now it depends on whether you're building a service or using a service. So if you're building a service, then you decide what token of payment goes to that service, how that fee is routed into each stakers and eigenstakers and your own token stakers. So you can decide all these parameters. Whereas if you're using a service, you comply with the service economic terms. For example, in the EigenDA, which is a service we have built, because we build the service, it is value accrues to the eigen token. The eigenstakers get the fee. Some fee split goes to each stakers, and the fee payment has to happen either in ETH or eigen. So that's our economic terms for the eigen DA.
Sure.
But as you go upstream, so we have our own service I mentioned called Eigen Compute coming up. It'll be similar because it's a service we built and we are going to specify the terms. But there are all kinds of other services other people have built with their own financial terms. And so part of what we're doing now is standardizing a lot of this so that it is not a headache to mix and match these services. Just like on Amazon, you can go in a single website and shop like whatever things you want.
Sure.
We want to have the EigenCloud console where you can come and mix and match all these services.
Got it. That definitely makes sense. I know we're coming up on time, so I'm curious what's on your roadmap. What can we expect in the coming months?
The big thing that happened is this year has been a major year for us in terms of shipping and delivering all the things we said. Early this year, we delivered slashing on mainnet, which means now not just staking and operators are there, but you can actually write slashing, which means anything goes wrong, you can slash the ETH or Eigen staked on the platform. Then we launched redistribution, which is don't just slash and burn the money, man. Like, give it back to the people who got hurt and harmed because of this, something bad happened. So that's a feature called redistribution that went live like within the last 20 days. When you're building a service, it's not just burn the funds. You can actually, if something went wrong, because your node went down, if they have staked like 100 million, now slash the 100 million, distribute to the app users who got harmed or liquidated or whatever happened. So very, very powerful. Primitive doesn't exist in any of crypto today. Then we launched on EigenDA a 10x throughput increase relative to where we are at like 100 megabytes per second. This is last week. So again, shipped this thing. Now, looking forward to the rest of the year and next year, what is happening? We have Eigen Compute, which is the service where you can run general purpose computation. You're not constrained by the virtual machine inside like a blockchain. People fight and debate whether EVM is better or the Solana C-level virtual machine is better or some other new SUI's Move VM is better or whatever. And we create a VM agnostic. So you can write in any program that you want, just like you would write on top of a cloud and send it to Eigen Compute. This hopefully will have it on mainnet by the end of this year. So that's coming up. That's called Eigen Compute.
Hmm.
And when we're talking about Eigen Compute, one of the biggest things, so if you look at cloud, the biggest demand driver is AI. Same thing, we think of EigenCloud, the biggest demand driver is going to be AI and agents. So, and you cannot write an AI or an agent inside a smart contract or a blockchain today. But you can actually write a full AI agent and deploy it on Eigen Compute on EigenCloud. So, what that means is for the first time, blockchains, Ethereum and all other L2s and other blockchains included, are going to have access to fully verifiable, fully on chain AI agents. This was a meta in the last, like, I think 1 year back when none of the infrastructure was there. And people ran fully centralized, non verifiable, trust me, bro agents. That's what happened in like last cycle. And then like people are like, then they realize, oh, that's what's happening. And then everybody moved on. But when you have AI agents that are fully verifiable, just like you deposit $18 billion in the EigenLayer contract, you should be able to give an AI agent tens of billions of dollars once it's trustless, secure, on chain. And so that's what we are looking forward to. So as we deploy Eigencompute, we expect a whole category of verifiable AI and verifiable AI agents to be built on top. So that's our biggest, that's what's coming up on the roadmap.
That's exciting. Really great stuff. Sreeram, I love what you guys are doing, and it's exciting. I'm looking forward to the future updates. I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
If I could create my own metaverse, it would absolutely be an agent-only metaverse.
An agent-only metaverse?
No humans, please.
Oh.
Sure.
Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Favorite food is dosa from the southern part of India.
Favorite musician or band?
Okay, I have to say my wife. She's a musician from the Indian classical tradition.
Oh, nice. Favorite movie?
Matrix.
Favorite book?
Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*.
Interesting. And then when you're not working on EigenLayer, what are you doing for fun?
I like meditation.
Very good stuff. Sreeram, like I said, absolute pleasure. And I would love to have you back on as there's future updates on EigenLayer. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Tony. Really pleasure to be here. And bye to all the Thinking Crypto podcast listeners.